All right, so let me ask a question here. This is just an inquisitive question from me. These links are unique every week that I post the live stream, right? Because there was one week where people said they were watching it before I posted a link. Like, yeah, and that might have been the time. And I was like, how are people already on? Because I haven't even put the link up yet or something. Oh, look at the stuff I don't know. I'm a very smart person. Yeah, I've got to switch over to their new YouTube streaming, but I didn't figure out how to do all these things. I may have to do something else because August 1st, they're going to kill the Hangouts. What? August 1st, they're going to kill this, so I have to have something literally within a couple days. All right. Hey, people online, you're just hearing random chatter. I'll give a quick announcement, and then I think I'm going to try and work through something that someone else was just talking about just to see if it's true, because I'm not believing it. Might be right, though. We'll find out. But today is sort of going to be, I was planning to do component classes, but I want to instead make sure, especially with a lot of people in class, that we have a chance to do hands-on work where possible. So I'm going to sort of finish up the thinking in React bit, which for the most part isn't really me doing more React code or that much React stuff. It's a lot of just some JavaScript embedded in React. Oh, looking at using Zoom. Yeah, I know. I've seen that mentioned a couple times. We'll see how easy it'll be to switch over and have those automatically uploaded to YouTube and stuff. But then, and then I want to make sure that everyone, so this, hopefully it shouldn't take too long because it's most of the stuff that you've done, but I want everyone to start with a Create React app that they are running and get that uploaded to GitHub, just so that they'll be able to use that as a starting point for building a project in the class. I've been thinking a lot about what would be a good sort of hands-on project for us to build out over the rest of the course. And we might do some other sub-projects that are smaller. But what do you guys think about a good one for us to work on, and people can even have some variants on it, is sort of a, if you will, like almost a profile page or something where you're putting up information about like what you've learned. Oh, we've talked about this concept and here's what I've learned. You know, here's some of the JavaScript or programming concepts I've learned, etc. So sort of like a, almost a portfolio, but not really a design portfolio, sort of more just coding elements. And that way different people can have different content on it. Does it sound interesting, or a way to like have a place to post some of the stuff that you've learned as well? We can go with a different project. Like I'm trying to do something other than the everyday to-do that is like always done. But we'll see, I guess. So if you have feedback, you have one that you'd much rather work on or something you think is within the right scope, we can work through that. In the meantime, let's see if this theory is true here. We're just gonna play with this a little bit. So what's a good website to start with? You know what? We'll just go with this. We won't even have a full website. We'll have what they have right here. All right. Look, somebody's crouching down here. I don't know. Could be wrong. You never know. So let's find somewhere to put this. So the statement was, it's a challenge to add a button, or you can't add a button after you already have a button inside of like a list item in a list. Oh, you know what? I already have a list item from some of the other stuff that we did, right? So let's just play with that instead. That's going to work even better, because that will build right on what we've already started. So we're in our thinking in React. Let's do npm start to start up my server because it's not running right now. And that should automatically start up the server, and it opens up the page. Awesome. Yeah, just a moment. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so that stuff's a reasonable size as we work on it here. Hopefully that's visible. What do you want to see here? Yeah, well, I've already done like create React app and all of that. I can walk through that again later if people need to. I just do npm. I'm in the right folder, and so npm start is what you run. If you want to know how that's working, this is what's happening there. Let me give a quick overview of what's going on, because I don't know if we've talked about that a lot, but inside of this package JSON file, let's minimize some of these things that we don't care about right now. You've got your dependencies, and I think we just started touching on this in the last course a little bit, like how you can add dependencies and pull them in through this. There's also this script section here, and this file, this script section is something that npm, when you use it, knows how to read. And so the scripts have a name, and then when you invoke that name, it will run whatever this instruction is. And you can actually add whatever arbitrary steps you want here, but only some of the some pre-existing ones, like that it knows about, or well-known ones, can you use this shortcut of just npm and that name. Otherwise, you have to say npm run. So if I were to, let me kill this real fast, and if I did npm run start, that's pretty much the same thing. And that will work for any command in this scripts folder. So let me show you real fast, just for the sake of, you can put any other scripts that you want in here, right? Like hello, and all this is going to do is echo hello world, because these are just running in the command line. These aren't actually running in React or anything. npm just runs whatever that is. I hope this works. I don't know if it will. We're gonna find out. And if I do npm run hello, it just ran echo hello world, which is the same as if I did echo hello world right here. It's just a command running in my command line. So all that's happening with that, and this isn't really what I was intending to talk about today, but all that's happening there is these are just a nice set of easily accessible scripts that let you do certain things. So we've also used like npm test, right? Or npm run test in order to get our tests going. Now we didn't use eject. Don't call that. Imagine it's like has anybody ever played the game, what is it? It's Perfection. So this is an old game. It's a cruel game. Especially we had a head-to-head version when I was a kid, which makes it even meaner. So what it is you got a whole bunch of little puzzle pieces that fit only with one other piece on each board. So you've got a board of like, let me see if I can find a picture of it. All right. So this is what it looks like, except it's worse than the head-to-head one that we had. And yeah, head-to-head is like cruel. So the way this works is you've got all these pieces, and then you push the board down, and you set a timer, but in head-to-head there's a second timer, which is your opponent. And then your job is to try to fit all your pieces in the correct place on the board. And then when you finish, you can hit the bar on your side, and it'll pop the other pieces thing up, and all the pieces go everywhere, right? Long story short, that's a little bit what that eject command is like, because there's actually a lot of complexity going on behind the scenes that Create React App is hiding from you. A lot of tooling to build this app, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in one of the later classes. But for the most part, you guys should never need to care about that, because it does a really good job of having defaults that work. If you're working on like a big project, like maybe I am at work or something, and it's, oh, we're using a different framework for a portion of this and it doesn't work with their defaults, you may have to do this eject, which is going to put a whole bunch of extra crap in your project and add all that clutter directly in there, and now you have to manage it yourself, and you lose sort of that niceness of this Create React App simplicity.
When we create NPM, do we need to adjust this first?
You shouldn't need to touch these right now. They should be just fine for what you guys are doing. I just added one just to show that You know, this is just arbitrary. You can really put whatever commands you want in here. All right, where was I on this? Oh yeah, we were calling npm run start to run our application.
AWS, because I'm confused on how to use it in AWS and how to even look at that. Because when we were doing the table, I have to say, I was kind of what you were doing, but I didn't see the table and the cells. I didn't know how to even view it. And I thought that when we created in AWS, we created the environment parameters, having it set, but now I'm thinking I need to maybe create that and react again. I'm not so sure how I would do.
Yeah, I can walk through that a little later if you want. Log into my Cloud9 and show what it would look like. I'll probably just pull my GitHub project down, assuming it's easy to hook up. Shouldn't be too bad. And then just show you that way. So it may not be every step you were thinking, but it should be enough. Should be enough. So all right, we're all over the place. That's sort of what tonight looks like. Here's what we're gonna start with. This is me following on a hunch. There's a statement that you can't, okay, so if I have access to this TD, oh, a list, I want a list, right? All right, let me make a list instead. Watch the magic of stuff you didn't know you could probably do. I'm just gonna put an unordered list right here in my DOM. We're just gonna code some stuff up. We're gonna add a list item. Let me see. What's a good, look, I care so much about this. I'm unwilling to do this without putting some sort of header above it. So we're going to, this all needs to live in some sort of like paragraph or something that says, what's a good good programming languages, right? I don't know. And we're gonna put a list item here. We're gonna have JavaScript, and then we'll go ahead and exit out of this. And we got a list of good programming languages, and it's only one long. No, there's a lot of great programming languages, but all right. So what we were starting with was sort of a challenge here. If I have a reference to this list item, and I'm gonna use some shortcut stuff that I just know, you guys don't have to know this or be aware of it, but because I happen to have that selected in the browser right now, Chrome is very nice, and %0 gives me a shortcut to it, so I'm gonna get a reference to that. Let list item equals %0. Now I should have a reference to it that I can hold on to. And you were saying you tried to append a button, right? Append child. Okay, so I need to do document.create element button. I can't remember the right syntax for this. What? Let's see. Oh, we added a button. Doesn't have any content in it. Let's try this again. I added a second button. What? I got a second button. I got a second button right there. Let's check. Let's see. Yeah.
Right, so
Because when I added my second button, after I gave it an on-click function, after I gave the first button an on-click function, I did not add a second button without erasing the first one.
So I think, based off what you described earlier, I could be wrong, but it sounded like you stored a reference not necessarily to the list item directly, and you were accidentally storing a reference to something else that you were trying to append the button to that was then creating that behavior, as opposed to just the second button. I could be wrong though, but this stuff tastes awful. Yeah, and they're like light and garbage, whatever. What? All the artificial sweetener. It's fantastic. Mm. All right. So, oh, it's not happy with one of my things. Okay, so to get started today, again, I want to split this up. It'll be sort of hands-on. Let's start with working through the rest of this thinking in React, at least my solution to something around it. And then we can work collectively to make sure everybody is able to get a Create React app up into GitHub, so that, because what I would like for you to do, it's going to relate to this a little bit, looks somewhat similar but not the same, is, and I'll post something about this right after class, is think about what are some of the different things that you've learned through the programming classes so far here, Code the Dream. It can be any topics, anything like, oh, I learned about functions or variables or JavaScript or HTML or CSS, right? And what I'm gonna want is basically you to make a list of those as just an array and then render that using React. So, you know, and then we'll build on that going forward and continue to expand on that. So make it more complex in upcoming classes is what we're going to do. But that'll be a good starting point. It shouldn't be, that way we're all sort of getting started with something that's not too crazy. But where we want to start here is this thinking in React bit where we're rendering this entire UI, right? Because right now we're definitely not. I don't know why some are red. That's some crazy stuff. Oh, it must be saying that they're out of stock or something. Maybe they changed colors based off that. So let's build off of what we have right now for our thinking in React, and let's look at it should have spun up my app when I started this. Oh, did I just close it? I think I did. Yeah. I think I just need to localhost 3000. That'll be fine. So just open up another window to it. All right, there we go. So where are we on the code, right? I don't know if anybody went and looked at what we had, but we've got what are our basic components here. We've got a product row, a filterable product table, product category row, product table, search bar, and it all sort of goes together in this filterable product table, right? But what we're not doing right now is rendering more than one of these product rows when we render. We're only rendering one, and we're only rendering one category. Even though we pass all of the data into our, what do we pass into our product table? It's only rendering one of each because we're just hard-coded to reference one of each, right? So what we want to do instead is render all of the different items that we have. So I'm going to tackle that a piece at a time instead of trying to do everything all at once. And I'm going to do that. It's going to be a little counterintuitive because the first thing I'm going to do is comment out this bit of the JSX, and that's just because I'm going to want this to give me like correct information essentially when I render it, and I don't want to put a whole bunch of products in a category that's not there. So the first thing I want to do is render all of my products. And the nice thing is I've got this product row element that I can render pretty easily just by passing in a reference to a product, right? So it's not particularly hard. So there's a lot of ways I can leverage that to render all of the products in this example data, which I passed in. So let's do it with just what is probably the most basic way. We should all be familiar with it, and then I'll show you how we can make it a little more streamlined as well, something that's more React-y, more modern, JavaScript right after that, right? So what we'll do is I'll create a list of, what are we going to call this? We're just going to call it product rows. And it doesn't have anything right now in it. Will this work if I make it an array? It might, so I'm going to try that. So we're going to make it an array of items. And then what we'll do is sort of our most basic version of iterating over something, right? We've done this a million times. For let product equals 0, or product index equals 0. Product index is less than props dot products dot length. Product index plus plus, you know, we're just doing a basic for loop, right? And what we're going to do is just create a product row for each item. So that should be pretty easy. We even have a bit of code here that we can leverage. And we've got an array to push stuff into. So let's see if this works. We'll do product rows dot push. Again, let me make this a little more streamlined or broken down because I just like doing that. Product row, what? Either, I mean, they work. It's a habit for me too because I've written a lot of older JavaScript. I don't think you ever need var per se, you know, unless it's older code. So I encourage let just because the behavior is more predictable to programmers, especially from other languages. Var has some of those weird quirks. So let's generate this like product row. Oh, hold on. Let me copy here so that I can leverage what I already had.
Jerry, what you're doing is filling the information that we had before, or instead of adding the price and whether it's available.
Well, what this is going to do essentially is because this product table, right? The product table on this, if we go back and look at our thinking in React, encapsulates two parts here, right? Oh, it's down here, right? Where the highlight is. It encapsulates this name, price, bit. Then it encapsulates, well, it encapsulates three, I guess. It encapsulates the categories and then encapsulates each product row. So what I'm doing right now is just trying to render each product row for all of the products in the list. And then we'll build up from there when we have all of that sort of in place. But this little for loop here is just saying, oh, I passed in this example data, which is really just a list of products. And it's called products when I pass it into the product table. I just gave it a different name that makes more sense. And so right here, I'm just iterating over this list of products, and I'm going to create an element for each one of those products. But what I need to change here is it's not products 0. I need to do props.products of product index so that I get a different one each time I do this, right? So now I have a reference to this element, and then I can just add that to my list, my array, if you will. So push it in. And then when I'm done with this for loop, I should have in this product rows, it should be an array with one of these product row entries for each item in our table. So instead of rendering a product row directly here, I'm going to change this and insert some JavaScript. So I use the curly braces to be able to just inline some JavaScript. And I'll inline that product rows array, which will be this array of elements. And hopefully this will work. Let's see. And we get a list of all of our products there, right? So everybody follow that? Most people follow that? Okay. Any questions on what we did there? So what we can do to make this a little cleaner, because this is sort of, there's a lot of code there for just getting some product rows, is I can actually simplify this a fair bit. And I'm going to use one of the newer methods on an array, because this example data is an array that we passed in, which is map, which we've used a little bit before. But so I've got a list of products, and I can do map. And what map expects is a function, and it's going to call that function for each item in your array and return a new array that is the result of evaluating that function for each item. So it's very similar to what this loop does, because you could think of this as iterating over each item. And then this part is essentially returning a new array for each one. But I had to do a lot of extra code to do that, right? Now, a lot of times people will just nest stuff right in their map in order to keep it broken down a little bit. Actually, I think it might be easier for some people to read if I nest it. So one of the differences here when you do this map is it's going to call this function with each item in the array, not with the index. So the for loop, we were getting an index, right? 0 to the length. This one will give you the item. So we had to get the item by dereferencing it from the index. So this is like, oh, here's my array, and then give me whatever is at, oops, it's gonna mess stuff up. Whatever's at this index in it. With this, we can sort of simplify it, and we don't have to do that complex bit of logic. So instead, we will say, oh, we have a product row, and for that product row, I want to return something each time. And I'm gonna make this a really condensed bit. I'm gonna take this, just put it up here. Let me put all this on a new line so that it's not wrapping off the screen. And then what I need to change here is the product. This was just our way to reference an individual product, but we're already passing that in with this product row property. So this will give us return an array of these components, one for each item in our original array. Does that make sense? How we sort of condensed stuff there? This bit is a little bit of magic, you know, we've talked about it a little bit. Don't worry too much. That's that arrow function concept. I'll rewrite that in just a second to show you another way to have that written in case it's confusing. But then what we could do is get rid of this for loop, because we don't need it, because this should do the same thing, and we can go check. Sure enough, we still get our list of products, right? So now let me show you again. I did some sort of magic here. It's a little different than how we've always written this, but this is just a function. So to show you that, I'll write it as a function right here that we can reference. We'll just call it get product row. And get product row takes or let me call it get product row element. No, I like get product row. What it takes is one product as its argument. So I should have called this product instead of product row. That was sort of a mistake. It takes a product, and what it's going to do is return a product row with that product passed into it as the product property. So we've got a little function here that's doing the same thing as this, and we can replace this code here with a call to that function each time instead, because that's what's happening. So that should render the same. It's just going, basically what's happening is it's based off this data that got passed in. It says, oh, this map for each item. So for this object in the array, because that's the first item, call the get product row function and push to a new array, which is going to be here, the result of that. And then for the next row, do the same thing. Yes? What do you want to look at? Yeah.
Whenever you do it, like for each function. So how does that work? Because whenever you return a function, is it rendering?
Where are you asking about? Oh, you mean like here?
Yeah, like right there.
Nope.
Okay, that's right.
It's creating the React element at that point. So it's a little bit like, let's go back to the code that we had before right here, right? We were playing with this a little while ago by hand, so let's do that again. So I need to fix this HTML4. Hold on, I'm gonna fix that. That's up in this. I just don't like getting errors. Will that fix my? Now this is a different issue, and this is legitimate. Don't worry about that because we're going to talk about how lists should work later. So you know how we did that? Let me get a reference to it. Button document.create element before. And it was like, oh, we created a button. And I don't know how you pass something into it. Like,
Are you talking about like ID and
oops.
like on clip and stuff?
Yeah, I can't remember the syntax. Oh, you can, yeah, I guess you can do other stuff afterwards, yeah. So now we've got, there is a button HTML element, but we didn't put it anywhere on our page, right? It didn't render. That's a lot like what's happening in this, let me minimize that. That's a lot like what's happening here is it's creating this React element, but it's not until somewhere along the pipe you tell it to render somewhere that it actually renders. And where that happens, you're correct, is this index.js. This is where ultimately it actually does all of that rendering. And
so does it grab all of the functions that you're creating in index.js?
It doesn't like grab all the functions. It just, it basically invokes a whole bunch of stuff and then gives you back the result of that whole tree of invocations. So there's a whole bunch of functions called that return values. And then it just returns the result of all of that. So let me see if I can, trying to think of, and we can write something that would be similar, I guess, where let's just go down here where we don't care. What's going on? It's going to yell at me. You can't put code after the export? Probably. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. So imagine we just create some functions and we say, this is just the top level function. And this is going to be weird. This is going to return 5 plus, or we'll call this add 5, right? 5 plus add 3. And maybe we even pass something in here, right? We'll call it number, right? And we're going to pass that down into this. And then I'm also going to have add 3 that expects a number. And this is going to return 3 plus double or square. Square may not be allowed. Let's see. Whoa, don't do that. That's really screwy. Now it's bad autocomplete. No of the number. And here we're going to create a function called square that takes a number. And that's just going to return number times number. And so this is a sort of like what's happening with this React stuff, where then what we do is essentially call like add 5, you know, I don't know, 10 or something. And this is bad naming because it's going to get real confusing. You know, I'm just trying to throw an example up. But what happens then is now when this actually gets invoked, now it's like, oh, okay, add 5 gets called. Well, it also needs to call this, and it calls this, and so you know, and it calls, and so you've got this nested tree of function calls that happens, but only when it actually gets rendered. That's pretty much what's happening here. Is when you make this hook and say, oh, put this into the DOM, and it's like, all right, I have to actually call everything, and I have to create all the elements. So now go down through this whole tree and create everything, and then return the result of all of that work right here. I don't know if that helped clarify stuff. But yeah, there's this sort of magic happening because it's sort of only occurring at this one point in time when it does the render. So let's see what we have. Hold on. Product. Oh yeah, we're not using this right now. But we are rendering our product rows. I think stuff's looking good. Let's see. Yay, we look good. So we're sort of getting there, right? Now we're able to render multiple items. There would have been like some other ways we could have done that versus putting them in that array, but the array is good because it represents that list. Yes, we do have that error it's complaining about. Again, we'll cover how to do that correctly for lists later and why that matters in React. But there's still some things we're missing in what we're doing for this application, right? And this is where it starts to get a little trickier, because if we're trying to build out their thing, now we're missing our categories. And one of the challenges is we want to render the products only within their category, right? We don't want to render all products in every category. We want to render the products only in a given category. I don't know. That's mostly JavaScript code, and I don't think there's any real React elements, anything unique to React about how you would do that. Pretty sure they're going to have a solution for that in this Thinking in React stuff, but would you guys rather move to just making sure we can all get projects up on GitHub for a basic Create React app, or try and work through that more JavaScript centric versus React centric? How are we going to do this logic? What? Focus more on the React stuff? Yeah. I want to make sure people are getting more hands-on with it, right? All right, so because we got started real late, we'll pause this at this point and come back to it. I'll just go ahead and upload the state that it's in right now. Render all products. I added that. Let me kill it. Let me push it. So it'll be up on GitHub. So now it's up on GitHub with that state. And if somebody wants to, feel free to pull it down and try and figure out how to do the categories and splitting some of that stuff up yourself. That's just really a JavaScript problem. You can pretty much use the other stuff that we've already built out here to do that. It's a fun problem, so it would be a pretty good challenge. I would encourage you, if you're up for it, to give it a try, because there's just some minor gotchas about how you do that. Nothing super tricky. Should definitely be within your wheelhouse to be able to tackle that sort of coding challenge at this point. But I guess what I wanted to emphasize, the more important part was how you would render multiple types of things, whether it's a list items, or just something like this. off of some data. And that's because, again, I might even end the video when we start this because it's going to be mostly hands-on stuff. What I would like to see people work towards now is basically create a simple list of, so get a Create React app, app running. I think everyone should have that. We've worked through that together. Then get that uploaded to a GitHub project, but don't use, you may want to create a new one because you might want to give it a name like, I don't know, programming concepts or portfolio or just something like that'll be meaningful because you're going to want to stick with that name because we'll keep building on this project. So maybe like, I don't want to call it necessarily portfolio, but it might be a good structure for it. So maybe like portfolio might be a good one to create React app if you want to create a new one or rename your existing folder. You can always just change your folder name to whatever you want it to be at this point, as long as you haven't already linked up to GitHub. And then get that pushed up to GitHub. And then the next thing I want us to do off of that is convert it so that we've got, what you're doing is not all the Create React app like UI bit that it has, but just rendering a simple list of programming concepts or technology concepts that you've learned so far. And we won't focus on having everyone done with the list of concepts by the end of class today. That may take some people a little longer. Some people might do it faster, but hopefully we should be able to have everyone connected up to GitHub, pushing their stuff up, like a project up to GitHub before we're done today. Because I know that that's sort of one of those finicky bits that is just easier when you have hands-on help versus the coding problems, sometimes just take a little longer to work through. And then the other thing, I think this was a good, where was it? I've got multiple of them open. I think somebody posted, where is it? Oh, maybe I closed it. Someone had posted, maybe I had it on my, I have it open on my other computer, not this one. The link to that, let me dig it up from our conversation. That link to that small React project. Let me see here. There we go. So outside of the hover bits, which are a little tricky and you won't know the answer to yet, the other thing I'd like you to do is sort of tackle that thinking in React type approach for the next class and go look at this, this UI and just try and break it down into the different components. How would you compose this break this down into components so that you could build an application up out of those components? I think it's good because it's a simple one. That way we're starting with something simple and then we can move to something more complex, because this isn't exactly a coding exercise. It's more just trying to think through how you would structure something. Thank you, Quay. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'll probably just end the stream, but if anybody needs help online, let me know. The goals are getting, first getting a Create React app, that basic thing, connected up to GitHub. So that you can push your stuff up to GitHub. So it'll be much easier to collaborate, much easier to share your status, where you are on it. And then once you have that, you can work through trying to render a list of stuff in there. I did realize I said I was going to do the Cloud9 bit first too. So before I stop this, let me just quickly switch over to Cloud9. This should be really easy. It shouldn't take much, except I don't know my AWS stuff. Luckily, nobody watches my stuff. or they would have some special keys that they shouldn't have. All right, let's see. Username is administrator, and I don't know my password. There we go. All right. Cloud9. Let's just go ahead and connect up to this guy. Open my IDE. Try using Vim mode. Yeah, if you guys want to torture yourself, you should try using Vim at some point, or Emacs. I love Vim, but
When I was in our Linux course, all we were allowed to use was that we weren't allowed to use any user interfaces except for the console.
so you just use VI. You didn't even get to use Vim. Vim is at least the nice one that gives you some of the other stuff.
Yeah, like it was console only for the entire class.
I think the most answered question on Stack Overflow is how to get out of Vim, by the way, for those of you who have never worked with it. Okay, so the question was, how do you do like work with Create React App or something up in here, right?
Say like you're going to create a new file, but do you, when you try and create it in React?
Oh,
How do you do that?
you should only need to do the npm create React App when you're creating a new like whole web project. So that should only need to be called like once per project, more or less.
So if you put a new project in its own file, or you
In its own folder, you might put it in a separate folder. So you'll notice here I've got like React course, and that's actually the directory I'm in right now by default when I log in here. And I created test as a folder inside of there. That way my Create React App, wasn't at my home level. So this is a Create React App application. So I've got one. So if I went into test and I did npm start, that's a React application I can connect to. Let's let it start. And then I think this even works now. I think it's not localhost. Yay, there's my application running.
I didn't see that.
No problem. And then, so what I did, let me go back to the beginning, is I've got it in a separate folder here, right? I'm actually in this React course folder. Unfortunately, they mess with naming, so you see environment down here, which is a little confusing, but I'm actually in what they call React course up here. I don't know why they don't call this environment, but if you hover over it, you can see that it's actually a home EC2 user environment. And inside of that, I've got my test folder, which actually has a React application in it, right? And so all I did there was step into my test folder. So just change directory to my test folder. And then from in there, because that's where my package JSON and everything is, I should be able to work out of that. So then I can just do like npm start or run start. They're the same thing in that case. And that will run that npm start for that Create React application. But that's for that specific Create React app, right? If in this same workspace, which is perfectly fine, I want to have another Create React application, another React app, I want to just work on them here. I don't want to create another Cloud9 workspace. What I would do is I would get out of my React application folder, this test one that I'm in. So I just went cd ... which just means go down up a level or down a level, however you want to think about it, right? Closer to the root of the file system. And then here I could do a Create React app call and create another one. So maybe this one, portfolio, I don't know. And now it's creating another folder at that same level as test that I can now go into that'll be a separate React application.
You aren't like manually creating a folder, that's gonna create.
Yep. Yeah.
So you do that first before creating. I guess I did mine on purpose, that I created my folder and then I tried to, but today I tried to, do React training.
Create React app. Yeah. Yep. And then did it complain because it was like a folder already exists with that name?
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure about, then I put a new name on it, that is, the name is my house.
Right.
And, then I was kind of.
Yeah. It'll create the folder name for you, so you don't have to have it. In fact, you shouldn't have it before you use Create React App. It'll automatically do all of that. And that's what it's doing right here. It's just spinning stuff up. It's going to take a little while now. Hopefully not too long. Yay! And now I've got 2 separate React apps on this, in this environment, and I can go into a different one, right? I can go into the portfolio one and look at it. Now it's going to look the same because I haven't changed anything between the two, right? They have, their files are the same. They're not the same files, but they have the same content in the files, right? So at this point, they, there's nothing really different between them, but now they could change. And one of the other great things about this Create React app is, like I said, it already created a Git project for you. That's why you see master on here, for example. We didn't have to create that Git project. We didn't have to create a Git ignore list that was ignoring the files that we don't want it to care about for React. It already did most of that for us. Now that doesn't mean, that means you've got a Git project if you use Create React app. So, the goal today is to make sure you can get that up into GitHub, but it doesn't mean that it's connected to GitHub, right? But it does mean you already have a Git project, which means when you log into GitHub to create a project there or a repo there, you've got a couple options. One is you're creating a new one, and the other option is, oh, I'm going to connect this to an already existing, Git repository somewhere. That's what you would want to do, is you want to connect it to an existing Git repository because you've already got one for whatever you spun up. Yeah. Let's just walk through it, right? So if we go to GitHub, this shouldn't be, I don't know for sure if this is going to work with my Cloud9 because we may need to connect some. If I do it using HTTPS, it should work. We'll see. We'll see how this works, or if this works. So let me see here. Code the dream, and this doesn't even have to have the same name as your other folder, right? React class portfolio or something, I don't know. And it's got to be public, I believe. I don't know if you can do private as an individual or not without paying. And then here's where it says skip this step if you're importing an existing repository, which, assuming you use Create React app locally, you will be. So you don't want to initialize the repository with a README or anything. So you're already good to go because it's already skipped. And then you create a repository up there. And here's where it'll help give you instructions on how to hook your stuff up. It'll say, oh, if you want to push an existing repository, you can do it in these different ways. Now, I don't have an SSH key hooked up on my Cloud9. Normally I do because it makes life really easy for me, but I'll just use HTTPS because that's a simpler initial setup. It just means that you have to type more each time you want to connect them. So now I switched over to HTTPS. It says, oh, here's what you need to do. You're going to push an existing repository. You need to do 2 things. You need to run this first command. And what this is going to do is tell that repository, oh, here's a remote location for my code that I want you connected to. So let's say it's this portfolio thing. I need to be in this folder. And then I'll just run that git command, which should add this remote connection. So now if I listed git remote, we'll see I've got origin there. And if I do git remote -v, which is verbose, it'll show me all the details. Here's the remote Git that I have. And now the next thing is just push it up. So I hope this will work. We may have a problem with what ports are open off of our system. We'll find out, but we'll try. All right. So we need that, and then I need my password, which I don't know. I hope this will paste into here. I don't know if it will. I think it did.
What do they normally, I forgot what we use for passwords.
It depends on if you set up the SSH connection or not. And I didn't in this case. And I don't know how to, we'd used a mechanism to hook it up like down here or something, which I don't think the same mechanism exists in the cloud, the AWS Cloud 9 variant. So for what you guys are doing at this point, like it's probably fine. Like, I mean, honestly, a lot of people just use HTTPS all the time. They'll just type in their username and password whenever they need to push something or pull something. It works just fine. I like the SSH because it means I don't have to type stuff in as often, and it's just a little more streamlined if you're working with it a ton. But using HTTPS is probably just a simpler path right now for most people. So yeah, I think that's a much more streamlined process than what we were doing before with the setting up the SSH key for each Cloud 9 repo.
I have, so whenever you do a create React app,
Yes.
it also does a get in.
Yes, when you do create React app, it creates a git ignore file.
Yeah, so one thing, I was trying to look at the folder that you just pushed up, and you import the modules.
Yes. You want to ignore node modules.
I know you do.
Because otherwise you get hundreds of files, like hundreds of megs.
Yeah,
What you want to do is the way you figure that out is you just pull that down and do npm install, which is another one of those commands, and it'll install everything locally. So instead of me needing to push them up there, you can just reinstall them from the npm repository. Now, mind you, there's a whole debate, in the community over whether that's a good practice in real production environments, because it means you're dependent on a live system all the time, and if anything changed, something can go wrong. But for a basic workflow, it works much easier. That way, you're not pushing around hundreds of megs of files, and each person can just pull them down to their system. That was a good question. Good point. Anything else on this? Other questions about how this was sort of hooked up or anything? All right. So, I mean, we've gone pretty long already. So what I'll do is I'll continue. We'll do this a little bit like we did with the Create React app last time, right? Is when you have your Create React app hooked up to GitHub and you've pushed, or in app, some code pushed up into a GitHub project, either call me over or preferably post a link to it. Post a link to it in Slack so that we've just got these links for the different projects that people have up there. And then if you've got that, you're working, you're good to go, then you can feel free to, if you want to, start working on putting a list of stuff that you've learned in there, or you can build out on that more later if you want. And I will end the stream now so that you guys aren't just sitting on dead, air while I'm helping people out. I'll see you guys on Saturday.